Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. What started as all things related to brain health and wellness has morphed into largely brain injury health and wellness, with occasional other neurological topics. My mission remains the same, to help you on the path to a healthier brain. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Christian featured speaker, award-winning author, and empowerment coach, Claudette Milner. Thank you so much for joining me today, Claudette.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into what we're going to talk about today, and today we're going to talk about finding your why, but I always ask the story about, tell me a little bit more about what got you to what you're doing today, and share as much or as little as you want to share.
I have been writing for 20 plus years, but what got me to this particular book was I had a stroke, and after the stroke, the first thing I did was ask, am I going to write again? Mm-hmm. Being me, instead of asking my daughter to bring house shoes or blankets or anything or a reasonable gown, I asked for my laptop. As soon as I could function in the ICU, I asked for my laptop. And when I got it, I was like, I couldn't write. I couldn't write. I had slow tremors to my hand, and I had to question my why. And I had to ask myself, Claudette, what is your why? And I said, to give every child a voice. And at that moment, I knew that I had to continue to progress. And by progression, I set up the 5 steps to transformation.
Awesome. How long did it take you to recover from your stroke?
It was actually in the ICU for, I think, 5 days. And then I was in the regular for 5 days. I was doing PT and all of that. But in the hospital, this woman, this nurse, she said, you're walking pretty good. And I said, yes, because I've always exercised. And I've always taken long walks. And she said, well, what do you do when you exercise? And I say, I play, my gospel music. She said, what? And I said, oh, the presence of the Lord is here. And she flipped it on. And she allowed me to do my Benzies all around the ward and play my favorite songs. And the one thing I asked of her, and that was 5 days. And one thing I asked of her, I said, can you take me outside and let me walk an incline? Because the church is on the corner and it has an incline. So I need to practice. And she did. And they sent me to PT, when I got out. And I was looking for the PT office because they told me not to drive, so I didn't drive. I'm looking and I couldn't find it. And I said, well, I guess I'll do PT at home. And so I caught the bus, I went back home, and I started I did my PT exercises that I had done in the hospital until I got stronger. And even, now it's a whole transformation, which is why I did the steps, because I work out every other day, and I was working out every day, but the doctor said, you're not going to lose any weight building muscle. So I switched, but it's the only difference in the walking is I recognize that I have to do things differently. So now after I walk up a hill, I find a bench and I sit. And I'm okay with that, right? Because I'm not trying to impress anybody with my walking and how far I walk. And then I get up and I tell myself, Claudette, you're walking with purpose. You're walking to an event. You're walking to pay your rent, whatever it is. You're walking with a purpose. So let's handle the purpose and then go back home and lay on the couch, right?
Yeah. It's a balancing act. Yes. Yeah. I love that you were able to incorporate the music into your rehab. I think if we as rehab professionals, whether it's nurses, PT, OT, if they find the thing that helps to motivate you, the thing that makes you happy, it tends to go better with recovery in general. So I'm very glad that they helped you connect that piece.
They did. And it was wonderful because I'm also a songwriter. And so, and in being a songwriter, when I was going through my mental health, I was writing songs, but I did, one of the steps was mental health. And the reason I did mental health was because when I got out, I was staying with my daughter and she was like, "Ma, you cannot go to the book event." I'm 69. Okay. So you can't do this anymore. You can't sit down and write these books anymore. And I decided that I was going to write a book, right? And I published it and I felt good. And I told two of my friends to review it. The reviews were horrendous.
Oh,
and
no.
I was like, they were horrendous. I will not remove them from Amazon because that is my go-to what happened. And when I got it back again, I had to question my why. Because I had to decide if I was going to fight my family to reclaim my why, if I was going to be able to have the technical skills to reclaim my why. And I decided, my daughter said, it's either stay with me or give up your why. And I packed my bags and went to a hotel. And I was like, nobody is going to block me, therefore mental health. Because when a life event happens, you have to fight everybody around you that thinks they know better than God knows for you and better than you know for yourself. And so you have to be willing to get into the boxing ring and say, I appreciate your love. I appreciate your kindness. I appreciate all this, but God's not through with me yet. And so thereby, the first step, introspection. What do I need to change in order to write again? And then the mental health, because you can't write when you're broken.
Yeah.
You can't be healthy when you're broken. And that's why I say so importantly, faith plus mental health can coexist. And I say that for all Christians that think that I can walk up to the altar broken and unhealed, and God's going to put that lightning bolt on me, and all of a sudden, 20 years of trauma, I'm going to be healed. And so when I say that, I speak to Christians because God created you to help me heal. And that's, and that's something that people don't want to talk about. People don't want to discuss. And Christians don't like it when I say that, but that's the truth. You need somebody to talk about your fears, your greatest fears. And my greatest fear was, would I write again? And for my children, their greatest fear was, will my mother survive this? Or will she end up
It's all a matter
me
of
taking
perspective.
care of her? Right. And you have to be able to discuss your perspective in an event.
Yeah. So let's back up a second. How does somebody know what their why is?
You know what your why is by your passion. And I say this because I've been reading the reviews on Barnes and Nobles, and there are various reviews. And one teenager or college student said, I read this book twice because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was afraid because so much of the time, just like with me, my why in my younger days was my parents' why. That's why I ask the question all the time, are you living your why or surviving somebody else's? I went to college surviving my parents' why. They said, get a job to make money. So I did chemistry. And then when I got bored with that, I said, okay, I'll be an attorney because that gets their approval also, right? Because I'm fighting for my parents' love and approval. And then one day, my mother told me, she said, when you invest in yourself, that will be your passion and that will be your why. because she told me I wanted to record a song and I wanted them to pay for it because I was a spoiled brat. And she said, go have a yard sale. And that book never got published, right? But later, when I had to pay, when I wrote and I had to pay, I wrote the check. And when I wrote the check, I was like, okay, this is my passion. And it's like your why is what God has purposed you to be and to do. But as women, we give up our why so many times and live through our kids and live through our husband's business. And then when you get a divorce, because the man said you haven't grown any, and I need somebody at my side, right? I need somebody at my side that's going to grow with me. And you're thinking, I gave up everything for you. Choose yourself, because even with grandkids, I have to set up an appointment with my grandkids in order to have a conversation with them. And they get out their calendar. Well, Grandma, Alex is not available here, right? And Chris is not available here. But they grow up and you are still desperately unhappy because you either never identified your why or you knew it from the time you were born, but you never took the steps that you needed in order to live a purposeful life. And so I tell parents all the time with their kids, stop taking those kids to the football field when they want to dance.
Yeah.
This is not your dream. It's theirs.
Yeah. So the other thing that comes into play, though, is when maybe we did follow our dreams, maybe we did follow that path leading to our why, and then something life-changing happens, like a stroke or a traumatic brain injury is what I had. And you have that happen, and then you start to question, can I get back to my why? So that's where you created their 5 steps?
That's where I created the 5 steps, because I said, how do I get back to my why? And people think it doesn't just happen. It's an entire stage. The transformation is still completing, because after the introspection, after the spiritual growth, and for me, spiritual growth is extremely important, but I tell people, you don't have to believe as I believe. Moments of inspiration, quotes of inspiration. I'm a new creature. I say I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. When I get up out of the bed and I've got to sit there for a moment and I get up, I say, God created me in his image. He created me with a purpose. And somebody asked me at the book club yesterday, what do you do when you cry? Because I cried a lot of tears. I did. I went through that. I cried a lot of tears. And I call it my pity parties. I had a pity party. And then I woke up and I said, you know what? God woke you up today because he has a purpose for you. He didn't wake you up to sit at the table and watch soap operas all day. He has a divine purpose for your life and you need to step into it, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the first step is introspection.
Introspection. It is deciding whether you want to continue and fight for the why, or if you need to transform it this time. Because you may not be able to do what you did before. I'm back at the podium, but when I flew to Chicago, my daughter called me 3 times. And finally I had to say, I'm in the middle of a conference. Don't call me anymore. And she said, why'd you pick up the phone? I said, because you rang during the conference. Right? Yeah, you have to make that decision, and you may have to transition. Like the pandemic, we all had to transition. And so in transitioning, transforming, that's when it really came to head on with, why are you doing this business? Are you doing this business for accolades? Are you doing this business for money? Are you doing this business because you love it? because the people that did not transform during the pandemic, it wasn't their why. They did not put all their energy into transforming, or they didn't do something else. And I tell somebody yesterday, please don't quit your job today because you're not living your why, right?
Yeah.
Because my banker, I asked her and she said, I ask myself that question every day I drive to this job. Obviously, she had something else that she wanted to do. But while you're doing that, start your steps, because the next step after spiritual growth is mental health and being able to discuss those things and with a mental health clinician. And then the next one is the physical, being able to work on your health. And the book gives you an outline to do after my story. And the audiobook is actually on Spotify now. But so you can listen to it as you go to work, right?
Nice.
To the job
Nice.
you really don't like.
Yeah.
But then the last step is educational growth. Because when you get fired from that job, the first thing you want to do is blame everybody else. But when you get fired from that job, you have to look at it, or you don't get that promotion, right? Have I done everything that I could do? Do I need more education? Do I need to hone my skills? Do I need to go back to school? What do I need to do? Because what I really, really want is to get a management position. And I don't care what corporate job I've ever had. Go back. If they say, Claudette, you can take master classes for $10. Claudette Milner is, even as a parent, I'm taking the class, right?
Yeah.
I've learned AI.
Nice.
I can migrate that now, and I've learned to implement new skills. I learned to download books on Ingram Spark.
Yeah.
I'm consistently learning new skills, even at my age, right? Because we have to
As
take
you should.
accountability. Right. We have to take accountability. If your business fails and you bankrupt, did you do this, and this right? But do you need to pay an accountant because you don't really know what you're doing? And the first year you lost money. Did you need a tax person? I had to ask myself that. I've got a team now. I had a team before, but I have a team now that I say, no, I can't do graphics. This looks crazy on TikTok. And I have a book formatter because I can't do it. Right. So what do I need this time around when I'm building the business besides good customer service? Do I need to pay the money to get a chef as opposed to trying to do grandma's recipes by myself? Right.
Yeah.
Introspection it's necessary. Yeah. And then, because if this is your why, you can do that introspection, figure it out, and move forward. But if it's not your why, then figure out what it is and make that transition.
Yeah. Yeah. So after my brain injury, I've been a nurse practitioner in neurology for many, many years. My listeners know that. And when I had my brain injury, I had to switch from stroke care, which I was taking care of patients with strokes and other general neurology things in the hospital for over a decade. And then when I had my injury, I switched care to concussion, but it wasn't an immediate effect. There was a period of time where I sat then and had to think, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this thing that I loved and this thing that I knew for so many years. So it's interesting listening to you tell these 5 steps, because I kind of did some of them, maybe not all of them, but some of them because I kind of had to. And I think those life transitions can force us to do those things that you're describing in your book there, or we can sit on the couch and eat bonbons and feel sorry for ourselves.
This is true. And when people talk about, when they talk about physical health, I was at a conference and I'm like, you can't tell me I'm not a ballet dancer. I mean, you may not think I am, but I think I am, right? And they were laughing at me because I was like, there was one Super Bowl that Snoop Dogg and Mary J. Blige were in. And right after I had my stroke, I put put that on and I danced to it every day. I danced to that Super Bowl track. And the only thing I couldn't do was flop down at the end like Mary J did. But I'm not saying get out and walk every day or whatever. I'm saying if you like dancing, if you've got a partner, go out and dance, right? Go out and if you like Pilates, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. Older people, silver sneakers. Do y'all have silver sneakers? Silver sneakers is
We do.
where you get to go to the gym free. And I spend more time in the jacuzzi than I spend on the bike because,
It's a feel-good
I
thing.
like it, right? Because I like it. It enhances my well care, taking care of myself, choosing me, right? And stuff. And nobody is doing a chalkboard telling me how many sit-ups I have to do. When I get tired, I stop.
But you're out there doing something, and that's the important part. Now, you may not tell people to go for a walk every day, but I do. So that's one thing that I always tell people, do something physical every day.
And because physical health, you have to understand that physical health is so important because if I can't walk to take the flight, then it stops, it hinders my why. I have to be physically ready to go on trips, to travel, to sit at a book event for 10 hours. And if I don't take care of myself, I relapse.
Yeah.
I relapse.
Yeah. So now that you've worked through this transition, you've written this book, are you living your why?
I am. My why is being able to give every child a voice. I have a children's series, and my why is now, it's transitioned though a little bit because I'm writing these books. The last one was Empowerment, Maximizing Your Gifts and Talents to Honor God. So it's switched up because God is setting me in a new little direction because I was going to write my next Children of Plains and States book. I said I would write it when they came back from Gaza because my characters were in Gaza when Israel got hit.
Goodness.
Which was a remarkable thing, and God aligned that. But then, I was in church and I heard a sermon and he said, pin it. And I said, okay, we'll do so. So it switched up a little bit, but not really because a group of kids, children, high schoolers contacted me on my speakers bureau and said, can you come to our school and talk about empowerment? So I'm still speaking to teens and still working with teens. But that is ultimately my why. And my family, listen to me, audience, my family laughs at me because I've had so many jobs. But during the course of my life, right, I've worked for OSHA, I've worked in corporate America, I did all these different jobs surviving while I was, when my kids were little, because that's what you do. You survive while they're little. But it doesn't matter. You don't listen to the judgment of others to define who you will be.
Yeah. 100%. There's only one being that's supposed to judge us, and it's not our fellow humans.
No, and because ultimately you want to live with purpose, you want to experience joy. And God did not create you to spend half your life living in sadness and living inside of a pity party because He did not create you for that, right? And I don't care how old you get, it doesn't matter. You're still, no matter what you're doing what pleases you. And I tell people, my daughter said, don't get on the dance floor. And I said, you know what? At my age, I can do whatever I want to on the dance floor.
Yep. 100%.
It doesn't.
I look forward to that.
Matter.
Claudette, do you have any events or projects coming up that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I have a DOXA, Women in Faith Leadership, coming up. It will be released on the 29th. I have a Glow in the Dark podcast with Aisha that will in the next couple of weeks. Of course, the audiobook and book of Transformation, Identify Your Why. The audiobook will actually be on Amazon, they told me, within the next 72 hours, but it's already on Barnes and Nobles. It's already on Spotify. The ebooks are out. I will be doing a spotlight tomorrow with a book club spotlight, and I will be doing a retreat for the Presbyterian women first week of October. It's like my
You are busy.
I am busy. I was talking to my business coach. I have a business coach, courtesy of the Urban League, because he's my third eye. He catches things I don't. But yeah, fortunately, and I praise God for it, my schedule is kind of filled because in the summer I do actual show up at book events. So I will be doing the Newburgh Community Festival. I will be there for a couple of days in person selling books and stopping you as you walk by and saying, "Have you read my book?"
Yeah.
I'll be hijacking you.
Yeah.
If you're in Louisville, Kentucky, right? If you're in Louisville, Kentucky, I'll be out there for it. It's my neighborhood that I grew up in. I'll be out there for 2 or 3 days under the banner of Claudette Milner Media.
Awesome. Where can people find you if they want to learn about your events and your books?
My website is www.claudettemilner.com. I am on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all LinkedIn, all social media. And if you just want to look at my collection of Stephanie books, you can go to Amazon.com because they're all on there. And the top 2 are my latest too. So.
Awesome. I will put links to all of your social medias and your website in the show notes so people can find that really easily. Also, as we wrap up today, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners?
My last words are: choose yourself. Know that God created you in His image for a purpose. And so when you wake up every day, say, "I'm walking in my purpose today." And if you're not, transformation, so that you will live a productive, happy, and purposeful life.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today, Claudette.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, leave a comment, and share it so that others can benefit. Please also consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. You can also go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to catch the latest info and get links on all of the social medias there. See you next time.